Hi, Abby. It's so nice to speak with you. I would just love to get to know your journey, especially what you're doing now. Just to begin, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Abi. I live in the UK in a place called York. We're going to get climb Snowdon as part of a team of mixed ability crew.
Cool. And I believe it's 14 people who's on the team.
Yeah, so I think there's about 13, 14 people in the team.
I believe you'll be joined by a partner, David Bainbridge.
Yeah, so David is in a wheelchair, so they're going to be helping him and pulling him up in an adapted chair.
Before we get to this huge mountain, I believe it's the highest peak in Wales. I would love to hear a little bit about your story growing up with arthrogryposis.
So when I was born, the paediatrician in the hospital had seen somebody else with arthrogryposis and knew that I had arthrogryposis, so I was really lucky. I was born near Birmingham, which is quite a big city, and there was a consultant there, I suppose, who had experience of arthrogryposis. Was really lucky for me.
I guess the hospital or whatever hospitals you were nearby, were there a lot of specialists who knew about arthrogryposis?
Probably Birmingham's the biggest city almost outside of London, so there are specialists there.
So growing up, did you meet anyone else with arthrogryposis, or has it taken time to meet other people with arthrogryposis?
I don't know at what point, but there is the Arthrogryposis group, which is a sport group in the UK, and for as long as I can remember, we went to the meetups every year, and I had quite a lot of quite good friends, and I still have some really close friends.
Awesome. When did you start getting involved with the UK group?
I think not long after I was born, I guess my parents started going to that group.
Oh, so they like were immediately researching, trying to find other groups, or I guess other parents who had kids with AMCSI.
Somebody within one of the hospitals told them about this group. And I think it's much easier. Well, I'd hope it's easier nowadays with social media and the internet, isn't it?
Social media has been such a saving grace. It's connected us two right now that we're talking. Otherwise, I don't think we would have ever met each other. I was also reading your Guardian article. I believe it was written in 2013, and it was an article really outlining what your day looked like.
Research. I'm impressed.
Thank you. What I really loved about the article and what I would love to emphasize is about personal care assistants. I think the general perspective is viewing personal care assistants helping those who have a disability. But I think what's not often talked about, which you highlight in your article, is about you being the employer of the personal care assistants, where that dynamic is not emphasized. I have a specific quote that I really love. You specifically state, I have lots of responsibilities as an employer of my PAs regarding tax, national insurance, checking eligibility for working in the UK, employment contracts, holiday and sick pay, etc. I would love for you to tell me more about how your journey with PAs have been.
I've always needed help, I suppose, getting dressed and with personal care. My arms don't work that well because I'm probably more affected in my arms and my legs with my arthrogryposis. When I was looking, I knew I wanted to go away to university and working out how. I didn't want to stay at home with my parents supporting me, and so working out how we could do that. There's a wonderful thing, and I don't know if you have similar in the UK, called direct payments, which was fought for by disabled people to put them in charge of their support. And so I asked if I could have one of these when I went away to university, and I started employing PAs to kind of come and help me. And it's not, I don't need somebody with me all the time, but it's just for those key bits to get up and dressed in the morning, to maybe do some cooking and put stuff in the oven, and washing and getting ready for bed. So it's quite sporadic, but it means that I can fix it around. Traditionally, there's a lot of care agencies which would provide support, but they're not very flexible. They don't come when you want them in the morning. They're not going to come really late at night if you want to go out in the evening and you're not back till late. And so by employing my own staff, PAs, then it gave me that flexibility to have the life that I wanted. I wouldn't be able to do half the things in my life if I didn't employ my own PAs. I tend to employ quite a lot of students. Luckily, there's a university still in York that I can employ students or other people. Often they support me while they're at uni, but then they move away. So you keep them for a few years and then move on. But it works really well and they enjoy it. They've got the flexibility and they don't mind coming sometimes late at night or early in the morning. Mm-hmm. So I think it works really well. It's been, I suppose, COVID's been quite difficult, and I don't know how it worked in the US, but suddenly if anybody had a cough or a sniffle, then they sometimes had to self-isolate for 2 weeks. And so you kind of end up having to have a lot of backups and plans in case.
But even speaking about COVID, I also do know that you love to do art. And I believe you were featured in a showcase that had like some sort of commentary to deal with COVID. Tell me more about art.
I'm very impressed by your research. So within York, there's quite an active disabled community, and every year they do York Disability Week. I suppose I put something in just to highlight the issue, but what they did during COVID, which they did what was called frailty scoring. So if people needed care or support, and it was kind of in a worst case scenario, if they were going to run out of equipment or staff, how they would prioritise giving care to patients. You look at it, and because I needed help with personal care, it meant that I was going to be really low down on the list of receiving care. And so I did that to highlight that issue.
Aside from art, I also know that you do gardening, swimming, triathlon, like you do everything. I absolutely love it. And in addition to that, sailing as well.
Yeah, tall ship sailing. So that's partly why we're doing this challenge and going up Snowdon, is to raise money for the Jubilee Sailing Trust. So they're a charity and they run a ship called Tenacious, and she was designed for disabled people. So you have people in wheelchairs, up to half the crew can have disabilities. And it's the most amazing place to be, I have to say. I first sailed, I think 12 years ago, and I caught the bug and I can't shift it and I have an addiction to it. The way it works is when we're on board is you split into watches. So that's like a team of people. So there's 4 watches on board, and at each time, each watch is responsible. This is when you're sailing, for looking after the ship, so steering the ship, doing lookout duties, and then everybody gets involved in pulling the ropes, because all of the sails are controlled by pulling and letting ropes go. And I'm a watch leader on board, so I can be looking after one of those watches and relaying stuff from like the captain and the permanent crews. You work a shift patterns. Most of the watches are 4 hours long, and then you swap, and then you do it overnight as well. So you do night watches, you do all sorts of stuff. They keep you busy.
Just going back to the Jubilee Sailing Trust, tell me a little bit more about the organization.
So it was set up, I suppose, from the Queen's, I think, a Diamond Jubilee like funding, and it was set up. And initially they adapted a boat called Lord Nelson, and then they realised there was a huge appetite, and so then built Tenacious, and that was all set up to have mixed ability crews sailing side by side, so that everybody gets involved, and it's all about like inclusion, but it also challenges everybody's both stereotypes and assumptions around both people with disabilities and without. I've seen people come off so changed after the voyages. Like people with disabilities realise that they can do so much more, and people who maybe support them realise that they are, or people who haven't had that much contact with people with disabilities realise actually that they can be really important team members.
Wow, and Tenacious is the only ship equipped for those with disabilities, am I correct?
Yeah, so she's the only one in the world that disabled people can sail on. So I can walk around ships, and I've visited some of the other tall ships because they race against each other. But there are a few waves and I wouldn't be able to get around. So she's much easier to get around and accessible. They've got a talking compass on board, and it's really inclusive. And the whole, I suppose, the atmosphere on board is never an issue around a disability. The permanent crew, they also do assisted climbs. So I get to go up the mast, or if you can't climb up, you can hoist yourself up or be hoisted. So there's all sorts of options.
It's something that I feel like I don't hear much about accessible boats, or maybe I haven't researched deeply enough into the subject, but I think sailing should definitely be something that's more accessible. Like you're saying, Tenacious has made it possible. Why can't that be something that's mainstreamed? And you're saying the pulling Together Up Snowdon is the challenge that's funding Tenacious specifically?
The sponsorship from the pulling Together Up Snowdon is going towards the Jubilee Sailing Trust. It costs a lot of money to run the ship. That's why some of the people have gone on the pulling up Snowdon. We all sailed together earlier this summer.
Where did the idea come from? How did this even first start?
I think we were talking about on the boat doing something big and bold and something exciting to get a bit of interest and publicity, that kind of thing. And all sorts of ideas flew round about what we could do, and we wanted to prove that having a disability doesn't stop you, but also that it, I suppose, working together, you can achieve all sorts of things. David thought we looked at different options of where we could go up, and we decided that Snowdon was probably the most, not realistic, but it's a challenge. It's going to be a massive challenge, but I don't know, there's other ones that are probably more challenging. Peaks and stuff.
I just want to make sure when everyone sees this video, the mountain is 1,085 meters, and into feet, it's 3,560 feet above sea level. So that is quite bold for sure. My next question is, what equipment are you bringing along? Like, what is going to make this possible to climb the mountain?
I suppose having the people around me to support me, because so there's many routes up Snowdon. Some of them are much steeper, some I suppose less steep. We're going to go for the slow and steady route up, I suppose. I think it's about 4.5 miles up and then 4.5 miles down. Yeah, I guess some of them will carry some of my stuff. That'll help me over the, particularly like the bigger steps and the more uneven ground.
Wow. And I also believe that even Snowdon is part of the National Three Peaks Challenge too. I think it's part of an event in which participants or whoever wants to climb these mountains, they start with like the highest mountain in England, then Scotland, then Wales.
Yeah.
So this is super bold, and I love that you're making it possible, and especially with your team. And is this going to be done in one day?
We're going to be leaving at sunrise, and so there's about 12 hours of daylight. So we're going to be leaving the bottom of Snowdon at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I don't know how long it's going to take, probably most of the day, and we need to be back by 7 p.m.
Oh my gosh. And are you a morning person?
Well, I probably wouldn't choose to be up at 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning, so we say.
You and me both. Not my preferred. For anyone with arthrogryposis, do you have any sort of message you want to let them know about, or any words of wisdom that you've collected over the years?
I wouldn't want people to think that the disability could stop them. Just go out and do everything you can. And I think with a stubbornness and determination, a lot of things are possible.
Definitely with the stubbornness. I think it's very necessary to combat a lot of the stereotypes that I think often serve as barriers to something that, like, you know, we can actually do. So yeah, girl, climb that mountain, show everyone. Well, Abby, thank you so much for speaking with me. And we can't wait to hear the results. Perhaps if you have time, you can let us know how your experience went. Thank you again for your time, and we'll see you soon.